Hello everyone, my name is Putty and welcome back to another episode of Let's Plays in Review, a series where I take a game that I've LP'd on this channel and review it in a more post-com, more organised kind of way. So the third game I LP'd on my channel was Pokemon Colosseum. The reason why I LP'd this game is because I thought it was one of the more dark horses of the Pokemon series. Also, it was the easier one to record. It was one I really enjoyed as a kid. In fact, it was it wasn't my first Pokemon game, but it was the first one I really got into. I have a lot of good memories with this game, and I wanted to share it with you guys, and that's why I started recording it. I wanted to add a little bit of spice to it, so I started recording different voices and accents for the four main enemies of the game, the admins, and also another side character, the semi-final boss of the game. This really, I think, prefaced one of my later LPs that I'm working on right now, which involves a lot of voice acting work, and it was just something that I could get out of my comfort zone and just have a little bit of fun with for 33 episodes. Definitely one of my more enjoyable Let's Plays, and it was very much low maintenance because it's easy to render a 4x3 video size with, you know, a GameCube game. It's the oldest game I've LP'd so far, although that will change with perhaps a few Let's Plays that I've got in the pipeline. So, Pokemon Colosseum is a Pokemon game, obviously, and for those of you who are living under a rock, Pokemon is a game where you collect a various number of monsters. There are many different objectives in the series. Originally, of course, the objective was to catch all 150 of them in the first games, but as the series has gone on, although that objective still exists, it's more to build a powerful team, a powerful set of Pokemon. Pokemon fight each other. In the main series games, it's usually a one-on-one battle, and each Pokemon has a hit point value, and when you reduce that to 0, a Pokemon will faint, and you win a battle when all of your opponent's Pokemon have fainted. A Pokemon will gain experience for every Pokemon it knocks out, and will grow and become stronger as a result. This is a side series game. There are two series in the Pokemon series, one of which is a main series and the other is a side series. Usually the side series games don't involve the same battle systems or the same... It's very much a departure from the main series games, which are collect 8 badges, go to the Elite Four, beat the champion, build a team of 6 kind of thing. The side series games are usually a bit more free flow, like in Generation 1 there was stadium games where you would transfer your Pokemon from your main series games to a stadium game where it's basically the same battle system, but it's not an adventure, it's just a battle, it's a set of battles where you could see your Pokemon in 3D. With Pokemon Colosseum, although it sounds like the same as Stadium by the name, it was more of an adventure, it was more of a story. Pokemon Colosseum was outsourced to a company known as Genius Seniority. Seniority later worked on Pokemon XD, which is the sequel to Colosseum, as well as Pokemon Battle Revolution, which was a more of a stadium type game made for Generation 4. That's Diamond, Pearl, Platinum, Heart Gold and Soul Silver, although Heart Gold and Soul Silver were not compatible with Pokemon Battle Revolution. It's not relevant. Genius Sonority went on to work on those two games, but they were the people who worked on this one, so it wasn't the Pokemon Company. This was a completely different company working on this, and you can definitely see with the dialogue, mainly, I'd say, and also, of course, the departure from the main series battle system, that this game was made by a different company. In this game, there is a difference to the main series. In this game, every battle is a double battle. Now, that means that 2 Pokemon will be out on the field at the same time, fighting another set of 2 Pokemon. This is a concept that I've struggled with for years to decide whether or not it's actually a good thing or a bad thing. Because the thing is, it takes away from the main series of Pokemon. It makes things a little more convoluted, a little more annoying at times, sure. Also, just a little bit more slow-paced battles. You can't take out Pokemon as easily. But it definitely opens things up for a lot more strategy and a lot more, there are some Pokemon that just have moves that work better in double battles, and it's really interesting to try out those strategies and move around with that. The thing with Pokemon Colosseum that also makes it different from the main games is the fact that there is a limited amount of Pokemon available to you. In the main games, you go into tall grass or caves or water and you fish and you find all different types of Pokemon. In Colosseum, you could only snag Pokemon, and you can only snag Shadow Pokemon. See, in Pokemon Colosseum, the objective the objective in that game is to catch all the shadow Pokemon. Now, shadow Pokemon are Pokemon that have been taken and turned into fighting machines, and they're the only ones in the game that you can actually take from the opponents. So you actually can only take Pokemon from your opponents, and there's only a certain amount that you can take. Like this, they're only the shadow ones. Now, the shadow Pokemon don't change. It's always the same shadow Pokemon every time around. So unlike a normal Pokemon game, there's no randomness in what you're going to see. You're always going to see the same amount of Pokemon at the exact same time. That takes away the randomness from future playthroughs and limits the replayability on the game. Saying that, it's a much more like Pokemon's always linear, but this is a much more linear experience. You go through in a certain way, a certain at a certain pace, and you're directed from one place to the next. You don't have any real control on how you go. There's no areas to explore. There are areas to explore, but there's not big open areas like routes to explore. It's more, to get from one city to the other, you just click on it. So there's not that much exploration to the game. It is shorter than a normal game. I'd say this one would take you about 10 hours to finish if you're doing pretty well. You could probably get it lower than that. In fact, I bet speedrunners are done in like 2 or 3. But I'd say if you're taking a reasonable amount of time, 8 to 10 hours is what you take to finish this game. It's definitely not a long game. It's not a long game, but it's not really a short game. It definitely has a decent length to it, although maybe it's not really worth the money you came out for. The setting of Colosseum is the Ore region. This region is a lot different from the regions that had appeared before it. Very deserty, very mountainy. There's a lot more different there. The Hoenn region is a lot more similar to it than the other 2 regions, but even then, it's a very different, darker kind of region to it. It's a more stylized kind of environment to experience, and it's definitely a lot darker than the previous Pokemon games. You can see that in kind of the art style that it tries to portray. It's a very nice change of pace. It's different from other Pokemon games. It's got, you can obviously see it's tried to departure itself from the other Pokemon games, and it does it very well. It's definitely, I'd say, aimed at not an older audience, but older than its usual audience, and it's definitely hitting that mark. Especially like me going back and playing it now as a young adult, I still enjoy the environment. I think it's very good. The environments are very varied. There's a very variety of environments. There's tropical areas such as Agate Village. There's the outskirts stand, which is a crash train. That's really interesting. Fenac City is beautiful. It's watery. There's very much a beauty to it. And then there's of course Pyrite Town, which is just a shanty little town. And there's the Shadow HQ, and then there's the Under, which is a really cool concept. There's Mount Battle, which is, at the start it's interesting, and then by the end of it it's really epic as the lava starts to pour down the hills. It's an extremely good variety of environments. Not as good as it could be, fair play, but it does have a variety there, and that's interesting to me. It's very colourful, I will say that. Despite its darker and more stylized tones, it is a colourful environment, and it definitely gives you a feel of a Pokemon game, even if it's not quite. Even if it's a little bit of a departure from there. I go on to talk about the battle system, but I think I've talked enough about the battle system. Overall, I'd say it is a positive, but it's not... there's definitely a negative there, but I'd say overall the positives outweigh the negatives. To go on about the story is generic and it's relatively bland. It's what you'd expect from a Pokemon game. Of course, the story isn't really what you're there for. It does take a darker twist with a bit of the dialogue than you'd expect from a Pokemon game. The concept of Shadow Pokemon is a little bit darker than you'd expect. Nothing like gory, no adult themes there really, but it's a little darker than what you'd expect from a Pokemon game, so that's pretty good. It gives hope for the series, so it can target an older demographic. It doesn't have to go with the cutesy, really bright stories that it's always gone with. But then again, Genius Seniority are the people who made this game. I don't think the Pokemon Company really had much attention into it, although maybe because it's a Pokemon game. I can't imagine that Genius Seniority could just go off and make it their own Pokemon game and make it as close to the original series as this. It's a very nice, it's very close to it captures the feel of a Pokemon game, and Genius Seniority I doubt went off and just made that. I expect the Pokemon Company had some influence on this somewhere. But I will say, Pokemon Company did go on to make a darker, not a darker game, but definitely one with a bit more darker themes in it. With Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Explorers of Time, Darkness, and Sky, those 3 games I definitely felt had a darker twist to them. There's the concept of death in that is very well realized, and especially like in Explorers of Time, I think was the only one that had the Dark World, and that's where Grovyle came from, and that's a completely awesome environment. And I think definitely that move into the older audiences came from Colosseum, came from XD was a little brighter actually, but Colosseum definitely came from that. It showed it. The characters are generic, and they're forgettable in general. The characters are very generic. There's not many characters I can say are very good, except for, of course, Mirror B. Who can forget him? Even him, you know, he's a little bit forgettable. The only reason why you remember him is because he got a little bit of cool dialogue, and then he's also got the afro, the awesome afro. So of course you remember Mirror B, despite the fact that in general they didn't design him fantastically. I have to be honest with you, but you know, in general he's okay. The dialogue is witty and it is interesting at times, and it's not fantastic. It's not exactly like Fallout level of dialogue, but it has a level of wit to it at times, and it's definitely better than your average Pokemon game. This is what I'm going at here. This game is a dark horse of the series, yet I think it does a lot of things right. Genius Seniority definitely had its own spin on things, and I definitely think it did a lot right. The plot twist is unforeseen, but a little bit hand-fisted. You don't see it coming. Well, at least I didn't. And I thought it was very good at keeping it under wraps. The thing is, it wasn't a fantastic plot twist. That's Evice, or whatever his name was, revealing himself. I didn't think it was particularly well done. I don't think there was hints at it throughout the game that was building up to it. I think it was pretty obvious, and unfortunately that really made it a little bit forgettable for me. Just to wrap things up, I think it was an interesting and refreshing change from the main series Pokemon games, and I definitely think Genius Seniority had a very good influence on what became a unique little twist on the Pokemon games. There were some good things that moved the Pokemon series forward and gave me hope for a better and more mature side series of games, and it definitely had an influence on Sky, Darkness, and Time. But at the same time, it was a tad too slow paced. The story was limited, you know, at best, downright non-existent at worst. But it's very good at what it does. It's enjoyable. It's very, very good at being a Pokemon game that draws you in and lets you enjoy the gameplay, even if the story isn't quite there. I give this game a 7 out of 10.